you. Thank you. You heroes.
Yeah.
The subcommittee hearing on unidentified anomalous phenomena, or UAPs, will come to order. Welcome, everyone. Without objection, the chair may declare a recess at any time. Additionally, without objection, the following members are waived on the subcommittee for the purpose of participating in today's hearing: Mr. Birchard of Tennessee, Ms. Luna, Florida, Mr. Getz of Florida, Mr. Burleson of Missouri, Mrs. Ocasio-Cortez of New York, and Mr. Olis of Tennessee. Without objection, so ordered. For today's subcommittee hearing, both the chair and ranking member will have 10 minutes for opening remarks. We may both be giving some of those minutes to other members of our party. And I'm going to recognize myself for 10 minutes. I'm actually going to try to get out of here in about 4, and then we'll give it to some of my friends over here. Good morning and welcome to the most exciting subcommittee in Congress to speak. The Subcommittee on National Security, Border, and Foreign Affairs for discussion of unidentified anomalous phenomena. I'd like to thank the brave military pilots and personnel, such as the witnesses on the panel today, for sharing their stories on how they've engaged UAPs, which has brought attention to this matter. Curiosity and speculation from all walks of life have generated interest in studying what UAPs are and what threats they may pose. I will say that when I was younger in school, I read a book, a 1966 book called Flying Saucers, Serious Business, and for a while, when I was a little bit younger, I thought it was the most important issue of all. The lack of transparency regarding UAPs, which was one of the themes of that book. It's like interest in studying what UAPs are and what threats they pose. The lack of transparency regarding UAPs has fueled wild speculation and debate for decades, eroding public trust in great institutions that are meant to serve and protect, as is evidenced by the large number of people we have here. I also want to point out in 1966, President Gerald Ford claimed to have seen a UFO, and in 1969 in Georgia, Jimmy Carter claimed to have seen a UFO. So this has led Congress to establish entities to examine UAPs. The National Defense Authorization Act of 2022 established the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, or AARO, to conduct or coordinate efforts across the Department of Defense and other federal agencies to detect, identify, and investigate UAPs. However, AARO's budget remains classified, prohibiting meaningful oversight from Congress. In addition to AARO's efforts,
I'm anxious to hear his question. My buddy Eric Burleson, and it's not in my notes here, but Matt Gates. If it hadn't been for Matt Gates, myself, him, and Linda would still be down at Eglin Air Force Base trying to get some answers. Got an incredible legal mind. Also, I know I saw it in the crowd here in George Knapp, my buddy Darren Corbell. They're not witnesses, but they've provided some statements on this subject, and I seek unanimous consent to enter those statements into the record, Mr. Chairman.
without objection.
Also, would like to enter in, I understand now that this is unclassified and it's public record, but as we all know, that's sometimes difficult for the public to get a hold of. A report, Defense Intelligence reference documents advanced space propulsion based on vacuum, space-time metric engineering, some light reading for some of our members.
Without objection.
Thank you. President Knapp wrote, since 1969, the position our military has been that UFOs pose no threat to national security and are not worthy of further study. I'd say that's the biggest understatement of the decade. He also goes on to talk about the dismissive attitude and said odds with what was revealed in documents, reports, and internal memos. Mr. Cabral says, as he writes these words, the UFO is emerging as a major topic of global importance. I can state that as a fact out there. I met a fellow who came in our way from Denmark to be here for this meeting. So this is huge. This is worldwide. I think we suspect what's going on, but I'd also like to thank the members of Congress who supported our efforts to make this hearing happen. Some of them even confided to me that they've had UFO sightings of their own. Those members, of course, some of them wish to remain anonymous, and I'll keep it that way. But also, finally, I thank these three great witnesses here. They took an oath. They took an oath to uphold the Constitution of the United States, and that again, they're doing it. And we owe them that. Y'all quit clapping, you're cutting in on my time. Just kidding. These folks have got nothing to gain from this, and I think you're going to find out that they've endured quite a few slings and arrows. You need to remember them in our prayers and their families. I'm thankful to them for their honest testimonies. They have done interviews and appeared in documentaries like Accidental Truth to get their stories out there, and now they are all here to testify under oath for Congress. It's been so difficult to get here today. I said, in the Baptist church, we say that the devil's in our way. And the devil has been in our way to this thing. We've run into roadblocks from members, the intelligence community, the Pentagon. I proposed legislation to go on the FAA reauthorization that just said if an airline pilot has a sighting, that when he makes that report to the FAA, that it would come to Congress. But I was told that the intelligence community did not like that, and the amendment was not even heard in committee. I think it's time for this country to take back our country. We need to tell the folks at the Pentagon they work for us, if we don't work for them. And that's exactly the point. This is an issue of government transparency. You can't trust a government that does not trust its people. We're not bringing little green men or flying saucers into the hearing. Sorry to disappoint about half of y'all. We're just going to get to the facts. We're going to uncover the cover-up, and I hope this is just the beginning of many more hearings and more people coming forward about this. And I yield back the remainder of my time. I think to Representative Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, we'll call him first. Swear or affirm that the testimony you are about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God. Let the record show that all the witnesses answered in the affirmative. You may be seated. We appreciate you all being here today and look forward to your testimony. I'll remind the witnesses that you've read your written statements and will hear in full in the hearing record. Please try to limit your oral statements to 5 minutes. As a reminder, please press the button on the microphone in front of you so that it's on and the members can hear you. When you begin to speak, the light in front of you will turn green. After 4 minutes, it will turn yellow, and the red light, when that comes on, tells you 5 minutes have expired. I'll now recognize Mr. Graves for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Chairman Rothman, Member Garcia, distinguished members of the House Oversight Subcommittee on National Security, Representative Burchett, and Glenn. My name is Ryan Fobbs Graves, and I am a former F-18 pilot with executive service in the U.S. Navy, including 2 deployments in Operation Enduring Freedom and Operation Inherent Resolve. I have experienced advanced UAP firsthand, and I'm here to voice the concerns of more than 30 commercial aircrews and military veterans who have provided their similar encounters with me. Today, I would like to highlight 3 critical issues that demand our action. As we convene here, UAP are in our airspace, but they are grossly underreported. To be sighted to not rare or isolated, they are routine. Military aircrew and commercial pilots, trained observers who fly depend on accurate identification, are frequently witnessing these phenomena. The stigma attached to UAP is real and powerful and challenges national security. It silences commercial pilots with fear of professional repercussions, discourages witnesses. It is only compounded by recent government claims questioning the credibility of eyewitness testimony. Parts of our government are aware more about UAP than they let on, but excessive classification practices keep crucial information hidden. Since 2021, all UAP videos are classified as secret or above. This level of secrecy not only impedes our understanding, but fuels speculation and mistrust. In 2014, I was an F-18 Foxtrot pilot in the Navy Fighter Attack Squadron 11 of the Red Rivers, and I was stationed at NAS Oceana in Virginia Beach. After upgrades were made to our jet radar systems, we began detecting unknown objects operating in our airspace. At first, we assumed they were radar aircraft, but soon we began to correlate the radar track with multiple onboard sensors, including infrared systems, and eventually through visual ID. During a training mission in the Warwick area of Whiskey 72, 10 miles off the coast of Virginia Beach, two F-18 Super Hornets were split by a UAP. The object, described as a dark gray or black hue inside of a clear sphere, came within 50 feet of the lead aircraft and was estimated to be 5 to 15 feet in diameter. The mission commander terminated the flight immediately and returned to base. Our squadron submitted a safety report, but there was no official acknowledgement of the incident and no further mechanism to report the sighting. Soon, these encounters became so frequent that aircrew would discuss the birth of the UAP as part of their regular pre-flight briefs. Recognizing the need for action in the answers, I founded Americans for Safe Aerospace, an organization that since become a haven for UAP witnesses who were previously unspoken due to the absence of a safe intake process. 130 witnesses have come forward, and almost 5,000 Americans have joined us in the fight for transparency at safeaerospace.org. The majority of witnesses are commercial pilots at the majority of major airlines. Often, they are veterans with decades of flying experience. Pilots are reporting UAP at altitudes that appear above them at 40,000 feet, potentially in low Earth orbit or in the gray zone below the Carmel Valley, making inexplicable maneuvers like right-hand turns and retrograde orbits or J-boats. Sometimes these reports are recurring, with numerous recent sightings north of Hawaii and in the North Atlantic. Other veterans are also coming forward to us regarding UAP encounters in our airspace and oceans. The most compelling involve observations of UAP by multiple witnesses and sensor systems. I believe these accounts are only scratching the surface, and more will share their experiences once it is safe to do so. In closing, I recognize the skepticism surrounding this topic. If everyone could see the sensor and video data I witnessed, our national conversation would change. I urge us to put aside stigma and address the security and safety issue this topic represents. If UAP are foreign drones, it is an urgent national security problem. If it is something else, it is an issue for science. In either case, unidentified objects are concerned for flight safety. The American people deserve to know what is happening in their skies. It is long overdue. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, ranking members and congressmen, thank you. I'm happy to be here. This is an important issue, and I'm grateful for your time. My name is David Charles Grush. I was an intelligence officer for 14 years, both in the U.S. Air Force, both active duty, Air National Guard, and Reserve, at the rank of major, and most recently from 2021 to 2025, or excuse me, 2023, at the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, NGA, at the GS-15 civilian level, which is the military equivalent of full-bird colonel. I was my agency's co-lead in unidentified anomalous phenomena and transmedium object analysis, as well as reporting to the UAP task force, UAPTF, and eventually, once it was established, all domain anomaly resolution office, ARROW. I became a whistleblower through a PPD-19 urgent concern filing in May 2022 with the Intelligence Community Inspector General. Following concerning reports from multiple esteemed and credentialed current and former military and intelligence community individuals that the U.S. government is operating with secrecy above congressional oversight with regards to UAPs. My testimony is based on information I've been given by individuals with a long-standing track record of legitimacy and service to this country. Many of whom also shared compelling evidence in the form of photography, visual documentation, and classified oral testimony to myself and many of my various colleagues. I have taken every step I can to corroborate this evidence over a period of 4 years while I was with the UAP Task Force, and do my due diligence on the individual sharing it. This is because of these steps, I believe strongly in the importance of bringing this information forward to you. I am driven by a commitment of both truth and transparency, rooted in our inherent duty to uphold the United States Constitution and protect the American people. I'm asking Congress to hold our government to this standard and thoroughly investigate these claims. But as I stand here under oath now, I am speaking to the facts as I have been told them. In the U.S. Air Force, in my National Reconnaissance Office, NRO, reservist capacity, I was a member of the UAP Task Force from 2019 to 2021. I served at the NRO Operations Center on the Director's briefing staff, which included the coordination of the Presidential Daily Brief and supporting a variety of contingency operations, which I was the Reserve Intelligence Division Chief on backup. In 2019, the UAP Task Force Director asked me to identify all special access programs and controlled access programs, also known as SAPs and CAPs, we needed to satisfy our congressionally mandated mission, and we were direct report at the time to the DepSec. At the time, due to my extensive executive level intelligence support duties, I was cleared to literally all relevant departments and in a position of extreme trust, both in my military and civilian capacities. I was informed in the course of my official duties of a multi-decade UAP crash retrieval and reverse engineering program, to which I was denied access to those additional read-ons when I requested it. I made the decision, based on the data I collected, to report this information to my superiors and multiple inspectors general, and in effect becoming a whistleblower. As you know, I suffered retaliation for my decision, but I am hopeful that my actions will ultimately lead to a positive outcome of increased transparency. Thank you, and I'm happy to answer your questions.
Thank you. Commander Fravor.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Congressman. I want to first thank the Invitation Speaking Committee on the UAP topic that's been in the news for the past 6 years and seems to be continuing to gain momentum. As you know, my name is David Fravor. I'm a retired commander of the United States Navy. In 2004, I was the commanding officer of Strike Fighter Squadron 41 Wolfwings Black Aces. We were attached to carrier and 11 stationed on board USS units and began a 2-month workup cycle off the coast of California. On this day, we were scheduled for a 2v2 air training with the USS Princeton as our control. When we launched off minutes, my wingman was joining up. We were told that the training was going to be suspended and we were going to proceed with real-world tasking. As we proceeded to the west, the air controller was counting down the range to an object we were unaware of what we were going to see when we arrived. The controller told us that these objects had been observed for over 2 weeks, coming down from over 80,000 feet, rapidly descending to 20,000 feet, hanging out for hours, and then going straight back up. For those who don't realize, over 80,000 feet is space. We arrived at the location at approximately 20,000 feet, and the controller called the birch clock, which means that our radar blip is now on the same resolution cell as the contact. As we looked around, we noticed that we saw some white water off our right side. It's important to note that the weather on this day was as close to perfect as you could ask for off the coast of San Diego. Clear skies, light winds, calm seas, no white caps and waves. So the white water stood out in a large blue ocean. All 4 of us, with your F-18s, we had pilots and women in the back seat, looked down the saw a white tic-tac object with a longitudinal axis pointing north-south and moving very abruptly over the water like a ping-pong ball. There were no rotors, no rotor wash, or any sign of visible control surfaces like wings. As we started clockwise towards the object, my wizard and I decided to go down and take a closer look at the other aircraft standing in high cover to observe both of us and the tic-tac. We proceeded around the circle about 90 degrees from the start of our descent, and the object suddenly shifted its longitudinal axis, aligned with my aircraft, and began to climb. We continued down another 270 degrees nose low where the tic-tac, we considered 270 degrees and we went nose low where the tic-tac would have been. Our altitude was about 15,000 feet, and the tic-tac was about 12,000. As we pulled nose onto the object, within about a half mile of it, it rapidly accelerated in front of us and disappeared. Our wingman, roughly 8,000 feet above us, lost contact also. We immediately turned back to see where the white water was at, and it was gone also. So as we started to turn back towards the east, the controller came up and said, "Sir, you're not going to believe this, but that thing is like a cat point roughly 60 miles away in less than a minute." You can calculate the speed. We returned to Nimitz, we were taking off our gear, we were talking to one of my crews who was getting ready to launch, we mentioned it to them, and they went out and luckily got the video. You can see that 90-second video. What you don't see is the radar tape that was never released, and we don't know where it's at, the active jamming that the object put on an ATG-73 radar, and I can get into those later if you're interested. What's shocking to us is that the incident was never investigated, none of my crew were ever questioned, the tapes were never taken, and after a couple of days it turned into a great story with friends. It wasn't until 2009 until Jay Stratton contacted me to investigate. Unbeknownst to all, he was part of the ATIP program, and the Pentagon led by ULs on him. And there was an official report that came out that's now on the internet. Years later, I was contacted by the other pilot, Alex teacher and asked if I'd been contacted, and I said no, but I'm willing to talk. I was contacted by Mr. Elizondo, and we talked for a short period of time. He said we'd be in contact. A few weeks after that, I was made aware that we left the Pentagon in protest and joined forces with Tom Long, Chris Lehto, Steve Justice, and others to form Two Stars Academy, an organization that pressed the issue with leading industry experts and U.S. government officials. They worked with Leslie King, who's President today, Robert Woodall, and Helene Cooper to publish the articles in the New York Times 2017 New York Times, and it removed the stigma on the topic of UFOs, which is why we're here today. Those articles opened the door for the government and public that cannot be closed. It has led to an interest from our elected officials who are not focused on little green men, but have figured out where these craft are, where they're from, the technology they possess, how they operate. It also led to the Whistleblower Protection Act and the NDAA. There are multiple witnesses coming forward to say that have first-hand knowledge, and Mr. Brush just covered that. What concerns me is that there's no oversight from our elected officials on anything associated with our government processing or working on craft. Believe it, not from this world. This issue is not a full public disclosure that can undermine national security, but it is about ensuring that our system of checks and balances works across all work done in the government using taxpayer funds. Relative to government programs, even unacknowledged wave programs have some level of oversight by the appropriate committee members in the House and Senate, and this work that is said to be occurring from whistleblower testimonies should not be exempt. In closing, I would like to say that the Tic Tac project we made in 2004 was far superior to anything that we had on time, have today, or are looking to develop in the next 10 years. If we in fact have programs that possess this technology, it needs to have oversight from those people that the citizens of this great country elected in office to represent what is best for the United States and best for the citizens. I thank you for your time. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and it's very difficult for all of you like I've done in the past to try to eliminate this issue. Call myself first for some questions. I'm going to start with Mr. Graves. Are your pilots that you interact with as part of your organization, do you feel adequately trained and briefed on how to handle encounters with UAPs?
No. Right now, military witnesses to UAP have limited options for reporting UAP. But more concerning is that the commercial aviation sector has not adapted to the lessons that the military has implemented. The military and Department of Defense has stated that UAP represent a critical aviation safety risk. We have not seen that same language being used in the commercial markets. They are not acknowledging this risk.
Okay. What steps do you think have to be taken to improve pilots' UAP reporting, in military or commercial?
Right now, we need a system where pilots can report without fear of losing their jobs. There's a fear that the stigma associated with this topic is going to lead to professional repercussions, either through management or perhaps through their yearly physical check. So having a secure system, reducing the stigma, and making this information available through the public is going to reduce the concerns that aircrew have.
Please give me a little idea of the degree to which reports in the past are not made public right now.
Well, I don't think there has been a proper reporting systems to gather those reports and thus not report them. So to answer your question, I think there is a dearth of data due to the fact that the reporting has been limited up to this time.
Could you tell me why you believe it's kind of by the devil's advocate, a reason why some of this stuff should not be available to the public?
There's certainly some national security concerns when we use our advanced sensors and our tactical jets to be able to identify these objects. However, there's no reason that the objects themselves wouldn't be classified. I would be curious to see how the security classification guideline actually spells out the different nuances of how this object is classified from the perspective of UAP and not national security.
I'll give you a follow-up on that. Assuming that there are reasons why not all this should be made public, this has been around for a long period of time. Can any of the three of you think of any reason why anything related to UAPs, say 15 years and back, should not be made public?
I think one of it is acknowledging vulnerability, both from a collection and obviously a countermeasure perspective. So it's now we have cracked for many years. Yeah.
Even say 20 years back. Is there any reason why we go back that far from shouldn't be made public?
Unless it shows a specific national security vulnerability as it relates to a weakness in particular defense.
Oh, okay. Mr. Fravor, the Tic Tac incident that you were engaged occurred in 2004. What kind of reporting took place after that incident?
We had a standard debrief where the vaccines went down to our Carrier Intel Center and briefed what had happened, and that was it. No one else talked to us, and I was in the top 20 about it. No one came. The captain was aware, admiral was aware, nothing was done.
Your commanding officers provide any sort of justification?
No, because I wasn't the commanding officer. I was fired, so, no.
Was this incident the only UAP event that you encountered while you were a pilot?
Yes, it was.
Okay. This is for anybody. Based on how much of your experiences and observations, do you believe UAPs pose a potential threat to our national security?
Yes, and here's why. The technology that we faced was far superior than anything that we had, and you could put that in there. If you had one, you captured one, you reverse engineered it, you got it to work, you're talking something that can go into space, go someplace, drop down in a matter of seconds, do whatever it wants, and leave, and there's nothing we can do about it. Nothing.
Okay, go to the other.
I would also like to add, from commercial aviation and military aviation perspective, we deal with uncertainty in our operating space as a matter of our professional action. Identifying friend from foe is very important to us. So when we have unidentified targets and we continue to ignore those due to a stigma or fear of what it could be, that's an opening that our adversaries can take advantage of.
What steps should we take to better understand and respond to UAP encounters in the interest of national security?
There needs to be a location where this information is centralized for processing, and there needs to be a two-way communication loop so that operators on the front end have the feedback and can get the best practices on how to process the information, what to do, and to ensure that their reporting is being listened to. Right now, there's not a lot of back and forth.
Mr. Grush, in your complaint to the Intelligence Community Inspector General, you claim that you believe information is being hidden. What kind of information do you think was hidden and you think should remain hidden?
Yes, I can speak to that very briefly in an unclassified manner, as a preponderance of my complaint is classified with intelligence communities. Both material acquisition and exploitation activity, also baselining UAPs, we're not sharing it with intelligence professionals that are actually doing step briefs to pilots, that kind of information.
Okay, thank you very much. Now we'll go to Mr. Garcia.
Thank you. And thank you all for your service and for testifying today. Wanted to talk about the UAPs as it relates to what we're seeing in the pilots' interaction with UAPs. The minister raised one of the big concerns that for members of this committee is this idea that pilots, there's those systems that actually report UAPs and stigma around pilots. And so can you just briefly, you mentioned that you work with 30 pilots right now that have had encounters with UAPs, but you've also, I believe, discussed and know of many more pilots. This is just those who are currently working with. Is that correct? Can you expand on that?
Certainly. I'll break that down two ways. First, when we were first experiencing these objects off the eastern seaboard in the 2014-2015 time period, anyone that had upgraded their radar systems were seeing these objects. So there was a large number of my colleagues that were detecting these objects off the eastern seaboard. They were further correlating that information with their other onboard sensors, and many of them also had their own eyesight as well of these objects. Now, that was our personal first-hand experience at the time. Since then, as I've engaged this topic, others have reached out to me to share their experiences both on the military side as well as the commercial aviation side. On the military aviation side, veterans that have recently got out have shared their stories and have expressed how the objects we were seeing in 2014, 2015 continued all the way to 2019, 2020, and beyond. And so it became a generational issue for naval aviators on the eastern seaboard. This was something we were briefing to new students. This is something that was included in the notice to airmen to ensure that there was no accidents. And now with commercial aviators, they're reaching out because they're having somewhat similar experiences as our military brothers and sisters, but they do not have any reporting system that they can send us to.
And let me just add both to Mr. Fravor as well as Mr. Grace. Not having the system for reporting, would you both agree that it's harmful to not just our national security interests, but to understand this phenomenon of what's happening with UAPs?
I think it's actually a travesty that we don't have a system to correlate this and actually investigate. So if you took the East Coast, there's coastal radars out there that monitor our air defense augmentation zone from out to 200 miles. they can track these, so when you see them, they can actually go and pull that data and get maneuvering. And instead of just having the airplanes, there's other data sources out there. And I've talked to other government officials on this, but you need a centrally located repository that these reports go to. So if you just stuck it in DOD, you wouldn't get anything out of the intelligence committee because they have a tendency not to talk. But if you have a central location where these reports are coming in, not just military, but also commercial aviation, because there's a lot of that going on, especially if you talk to anyone that flies from here in Hawaii or the Pacific, they see outlights. So I think you need to develop something that allows you a central point to collect the data and what you think that's.
Mr. Graves?
I would concur with everything Mr. Fravor said. I'll continue to say that the commercial pilots that have reached out to me through American Safe Aerospace are doing so because they don't feel there's another way for them to report this safety issue.
And I think one of the clear outcomes of this hearing already is that there has to be a safe and transparent reporting process for pilots, both on the commercial side and the military side, to be able to report UAPs in a way that's also transparent, but also understands the scope of our national security interests and what may be classified or not. But I think there has to be some sort of system. So that's something that I hope can be an outcome this committee can work on. Is there anything else for just the two of you briefly beyond this reporting system that you think that we can do as a government to encourage and facilitate more civilian reporting?
We're doing it right now.
Okay,
I
great.
think this hearing is going to show the American people that their government takes this topic seriously.
And how about civilians that may not be pilots? What kind of process would be in place for civilians who are not pilots, who may have UAP encounters? Do either of you have any suggestions that could facilitate that?
My recommendation would be to make that a sensor-centric operation in order to get as objective as possible.
Okay. Sir, Mr. Fravor?
Mr. Graves on that.
Okay. Just briefly, I also just want to note, particularly for the 2000 question, Mr. Brush, one of the things that I found fascinating in our discussion with Mr. Graves last night as well is that you both described UAPs and formations and the way they are observed in space or in our air, and the way that they move is essentially ways in which current technology or aircraft that we know of are unable to actually function or move. And so will you just, for the public record, again, once again, just briefly, just either describe or note that aircraft that we witnessed, particularly by the 30 folks that we're working with, are essentially outside the scope of anything that we know of today in the technology we have today. Mr. Graves, Mr. Fravor?
Yes, the objects that are being seen by commercial pilots are performing maneuvers that are unexplainable due to our current understanding of our technology and our capabilities as a country. And that applies for the military as well.
Mr. Fravor?
Yeah, I concur with that. We have nothing that can stop in the air and go the other direction, nor do we have anything that can, like in our situation, come down from space, hang out for 3 hours, and go back up.
Thank you. My last question, and sometimes I know you have also said some of these answers in the past, but we're trying to get them on the public record as well, which is really important. Mr. Brush, finally, do you believe that our government is in possession of UAPs?
Absolutely, based on interviewing over 40 witnesses over 4 years.
And where?
I know the exact locations, and those locations were provided to the Inspector General and some of which to the intelligence committees. I actually had people with the first-hand knowledge provide a protected disclosure to the Inspector General.
Thank you. And Mr. Chairman, I would just say that I think that these questions are important questions, and I look forward to being involved in the process to get those answered. I know there'll be a lot of questions from the committee members, so I yield back.
Thank you. Hello, Mr. Urchin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Garcia. I would like to have you on legislation to do just that on the reporting, and we'll get together on that. And you be my co-sponsor. That'd be really cool. Thank you. Those great questions. Mr. Graves, again, I'd like to know, how do you know that these were not our aircraft?
Some of the behaviors that we saw in the working area, you would see these objects being at 0.0 Mach, that's zero airspeed, over certain pieces of the ground. So what that means, just like a river, if you fill a bottle with, it's going to float downstream. These objects were staying completely stationary in Category 4 hurricane winds. These same objects would then accelerate to supersonic speeds, 1.1, 1.2 Mach, and they would do so in very erratic and incorrect behaviors that I don't have an explanation for.
Have you spoken to commercial and military pilots that see these off of our East Coast? Mr. Fravor, I noticed that in the Kit Kat video, It's Tic Tac, like the candy, not Tic Tac like the Chinese communist. Yes, I just want to make that just because my daughter corrected me on that and called me a boomer. And I said, no, buddy, it's Tic Tac like the candy. You have to just look it up. And but I would also like to say today is a day of many firsts. It's a miracle that we're having this meeting, and it's also a miracle that my wife has put up with me for 9 years today. Today is my anniversary, so I want to tell my wife happy anniversary, and I love her very much. As she likes to say, this 9 years have been the best 2 years of her life. Thank you. Mr. Fravor, what astonished you the most about the flight capabilities of these Tic Tac very briefly?
The performance. Absolute performance.
And you're not aware of any other objects that anybody in the world has, in this world, that has those capabilities?
I think it's probably when I'm actually on material science that we currently possess.
Are you aware of any other reconnaissance platforms that track or record the Tic Tacs or David's, maybe ignore that system or any others?
I know.
Mr. Grudge, thank you for being here, brother. Thank you all very much. Have you faced any retaliation or reprisals for any of your testimony or anything on these lines?
Yeah, I have to be careful what I say in detail because there is an open whistleblower reprisal investigation on my behalf. I don't want to compromise that investigation by providing anything that may help provide somebody information. But it was very brutal and very unfortunate, some of the tactics they used to hurt me both professionally and personally, to be quite frank.
It's very unfortunate, as they say, when you're over the target, that's when they do the most fire action. Do you have any personal knowledge of people who have been harmed or injured in efforts to cover up or conceal these extraterrestrial technology?
Yes. Personally.
Have you heard that anyone been murdered that you would think that you know of or have heard of, I guess?
I have to be careful asking that question. I directed people with that knowledge to the appropriate authorities.
Maybe in the, we could get it in a confidential area, skiff, we could talk about that. But unfortunately, we were denied access to the skiff, and that's very unfortunate in this scenario. Mr. Fravor, do you believe that you witnessed an additional object under the water in relation to your encounter?
I'll say we did not see an object, but there was something there that caused the white water, and when we turned around, it was gone, so there was something there that obviously moved.
Okay, it was not the same object though that you were looking at, correct?
No, we actually joked that the Tic Tac was communicating with something when we came back, and because the white water disappeared.
We were, in another instance, we're told about the capabilities of the jamming during viewing of some when there were some people chasing some of these objects. Did you experience any of that jamming or interrupting your radar or weapon system?
My crew at launch after we landed experienced significant jamming to the AD-73 radar, which is what we have on board, which is a mechanically scanned, very high-end system prior to the AD-79. And yes, it did pretty much everything it could do, range, velocity, aspect, and then it used to get the lock, and the targeting pod is passing. That's what we were doing. It didn't work.
I'm about to run out of time, but are you aware of any opportunities that have that capability? Okay, I would also like to note for the record that, like George Knapp, breaking Area 51, he's the reason I know about that. And the reason I know about the Tic Tacs is Leslie King, New York Times article, and I would encourage everybody to read that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Go back to no time.
Very good. Mr. Ranston?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Graves, you reported UAP encounters during training flights, I think, and have since come forward to warn the Pentagon that these encounters may be putting pilots at risk. My first question is, you've identified these as taking place on the East Coast. Is it just on the East Coast where these encounters have been reported?
No, since the events initially occurred, I've learned that the objects have been detected essentially where all operations, Navy operations are being conducted across the world. And that's from the ultimate anomaly resolution office reporting.
All right, can you describe your experience after you decided to come forward and go public with your experience?
Certainly. Like many others, in 2017, I saw the New York Times article come out as well. And for me, it was special because I recognized the voices on the video. I recognized the video itself. I had seen it when it was taken. I had seen it when it was debriefed. And so that was kind of tricky because I realized that this problem was still ongoing. And so I reached out to colleagues back on the East Coast and realized that this was still a safety risk that they were dealing with. They essentially hit a wall of how they could move forward on this conversation. It was at that point when I decided to try to move the conversation forward myself.
Are there common characteristics to the UAPs that have been cited by different pilots, and can you describe what the convergence of descriptions is?
Certainly. We were primarily seeing dark gray or black cubes inside of a clear sphere.
I'm sorry, dark gray or black cubes?
Yes, inside of a clear sphere, where the apex or tips of the cube were touching the inside of that sphere. And that was primarily what was being reported when we were able to gain a visual tally of these objects. And that occurred over almost 8 years. And as far as I know, it's still occurring.
I take it that you're arguing what we need is real transparency in a reporting system so we can get some clarity on what's going on out there, because there are many pilots in your situation, but we should have a way of developing a systematic inventory of all of such encounters. Is that right?
Yes, and I think we need both transparency and the reporting. We have the reporting, but we need to make sure that information can be propagated to commercial aviation as well as the rest of the populace.
Mr. Grush, what about you? What was your experience after you came forward?
Well, it's only been about 2 months or so I guess my experience has been overwhelming support from former colleagues of mine who privately messaged me, and I do appreciate that. But I do have knowledge of active planned device activity against myself and other colleagues. It's very, very upsetting to me.
Coming from where?
Certain senior leadership at previous agencies I was associated with. And that's all I'll say publicly, but I can provide more details in the close environment.
Okay. Well, I hope you understand that there would be bipartisan rejection of any attempt to vilify, demonize, or engage in other reprisals against our witnesses and people who are telling the truth from their perspective.
Yeah, there were certain colleagues of mine that were brutally administratively attacked. And that actually makes me very upset, but as a leader, to see that happen to other coworkers, actually superiors of mine over the last 3 years.
How do you account for that response? It seems like a bizarre response.
I call it administrative terrorism. That's their equipment, their tool in the toolbox to silence people, especially the career government service cares about their career, cares about their clearance, their reputation, to climb the ladder, and when you threaten that flow, career path, a lot of people back off. But I'm here to represent those people.
Mr. Fravor, what about you? What has your experience been since you've come forward with your perspective on this?
Actually, I've been treated very well. And the 6 people that were involved, myself included, all of them now will be retired from the military as 05s or 06s. And all my friends that are very senior, 3 and 4 stars, I've talked to them, they believe, they understand there's a problem, and I was actually treated really well.
And what is your general interpretation of these phenomena? Or what is your current thinking of trying to make sense of them?
Well, I'll say, I'm not like a UFO fanatic, it's not me, but I'll tell you that what we saw with 4 sets of eyes over a 5-minute period, still, there's nothing close to it. It was amazing to see. I told my buddy when I was flying. It's just an incredible technology.
All right, Mr. Chairman, thank you very much for your back to you.
Thanks. I'm Ms. Luna.
Mr. Grush, in speaking to you yesterday, I just wanted to follow up on Representative Raskin's questions. In the last couple of years, have you had incidences that have caused you to be in fear for your life for addressing these issues?
Yes, personally.
I just want everyone to know that he's coming forward in fear of his life to put in perspective if they were really not scared about this information coming out. Why would someone be intimidated like that? To your knowledge, are NHIs working with adversarial foreign governments in either technology exchange programs or back engineering programs?
I don't have the data on that, I'm not sure.
Have you heard or you had people come forward to present that evidence?
Not that particular evidence that you just espoused.
Okay, on the 19th of April, Dr. Kirkpatrick, head of Aero, had said that he did not find any evidence of UAPs. You also stated that you had, in your interview, that you had briefed him on information that you were uncovering, but that he did not follow up with you. Were the items that you divulged to him for international security?
Yes, him and I had a classified conversation in April 2022 before we took over Aero in July 2022, and I provided him some concerns I had.
Do you know why he might not have followed up with you?
I unfortunately cannot read his mind. I wish he did. I was happy to give sage counsel to him on where to look when he took the helm of Aero.
Okay, and then my last question for you before I move to Mr. Graves is you received prior approval from the Defense Department to speak on certain issues, correct?
Correct, through DOPSR, DoD Pre-Publication and Security Review, and I just want to remind the public, they're just looking from a security perspective. These are my own personal views and opinions, not the department's.
Okay, I'm asking that though mainly because I think that there are many people that would like to discredit you, so it does bring a certain amount of credibility to the testimony.
I'm required by law to do that as a former intelligence officer, or I go to jail for revealing classified information.
We don't want you to go to jail. My next question would actually be for Mr. Graves. Can you please explain to me in detail the event that occurred at Vandenberg Air Force Base?
Certainly. In the 2003 timeframe, a large group of building contractors were operating near one of the launch facilities at Vandenberg Air Force Base when they observed a very large 100-yard sided red square approach the base from the ocean and hover at low altitude over one of the launch facilities. This object remained for about 45 seconds or so before darting off over the mountains. There was a similar event within 24 hours later in the evening. This was a morning event. It was 8:45 in the morning. Later in the evening, post-sunset, there were reports of other sightings on base, including some aggressive behaviors. These objects were approaching some of the security guards at rapid speeds before darting off. And this is information that was received through one of the witnesses that had approached me at American Space Aerospace.
Was this documented in any official form, whether it was a police log or?
Yes, they had official documentation and record from the event that the witness held over the years.
And I'm not going to ask you to do it right now for time reasons, but you'd be able to sketch what was witnessed, correct? And have you seen that before on any other equipment and or during your flight time?
I have not seen what they described. This object was estimated to be almost the size of a football field, and I have not seen anything in person on television.
Okay, and then another question on follow-up referencing the gimbal video go fast incident. Can you just clarify, because to our understanding, the footage was actually cut off at a certain point, but what happens at the end of that video, just for those Americans specifically that are wanting to know about that footage?
Certainly. There was some uncertainty or instability of the object. It seemed to rock a bit, and that's the last I had seen in the video. Much of the data that I would recommend be analyzed would consist of radar data that would provide precise kinematics on the object, as well as the fleet of objects that were operating in the environment.
Okay, and follow-up, in regards to the reporting procedures that Mr. Garcia had addressed on as well as Representative Burchett, with the FAA, to your understanding, pilots that are seen as commercial airline pilots, are they receiving cease and desist letters from corporations for coming forward with information in regards to safety for potential airline passengers?
I have been privy to conversations with commercial aviators who have received cease and desist orders.
So the American public should know that corporations are putting their own reputations on the basically not on the line, but ahead of the safety of the American people. And I think would you agree with that statement?
I believe so.
Okay. And I guess this would be my last one. I'm out of time. I yield. I'll be back.
Mr. Moskowitz.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Gentlemen, let's talk about the laws of physics for a second. Mr. Graves and Commander Fravor, I heard you talk about speed. When those objects broke the sound barrier, did they make a sonic boom?
That was legit. You can't hear anything. It's kind of loud in there.
Yeah, you're not able to actually personal tell within the vehicle. I will say the objects that we were seeing, they were spherical, and they were observed up to Mach 2, which is a very deep, non-aerodynamic shape.
What about G-forces? Let's talk about G-forces of those vehicles. Could a human survive those G-forces with known technology today?
No.
Not the acceleration of the
Okay. What about what they look like? How close did you get? Did you see a seam or a rivet or a section? And what I mean is, obviously, the jets you're flying have all those things. Did these objects have those?
I didn't have the detailed vehicles of that.
So we got 1.5 miles at the same time, which people say that's pretty far, but in airplanes, that's actually relatively close. No, it was perfectly white, smooth, no windows, although when we did take the original FLIR video that is out there, when you put it on a big screen, it actually had 2 little objects that came out of the bottom of it. But other than that, no windows, no scenes, no nothing.
Mr. Grush, as a result of your previous government work, have you met with people with direct knowledge or have direct knowledge yourself of non-human origin craft?
Yes, I personally do those videos.
Mr. Grush, as a result of your previous government work, have you met with people with direct knowledge or have direct knowledge yourself about ATs, advanced technologies that the U.S. government has?
Based on conventional advanced tech, I was briefed to the preponderance of the Defense Department's both space and aerospace department programs.
Do you have knowledge or do you have reason to believe that there are programs in the advanced tech space that are unsanctioned?
Yes, I do.
Okay. And when you say that they're above congressional oversight, what do you mean?
Complicated question. So there's some, I would call it abuse here. So congressional oversight of conventional special access programs. So I'll use Title 10 for DoD as an example, right? So 10 U.S. Code Section 119 discusses congressional oversight. SAPS discusses the DepSecDef's ability to waive congressional reporting. However, the candidate is at least supposed to be notified of a waive to acknowledge SAP is creating that public law.
Well, so that how does, I don't want to cut you off, but how does a program like that get funded?
I give you generalities. I can get very specific in a closed session, but this appropriation of funds and
Does that mean that there is money in the budget that is set to go to a program, but it doesn't, and it goes to something else?
yes, that's acknowledged that way.
Do you think U.S. corporations are overcharging for certain tech they're selling to the U.S. government, and that additional money is going to programs?
Correct. Through something called IRAD.
Okay. Satellite imagery. Let's talk about satellite imagery. We have satellites all over the place, some that we're aware of and many that we're not aware of, right? We're taking pictures of everything at every point in second. Mr. Grush, are you aware, do you have direct knowledge, or you talk to people with direct knowledge, that there are satellite imagery of these events?
That was one of my primary tasks at NGA. Since we process, exploit, and disseminate that kind of information, I've seen multiple cases, some of which my understanding, of course, I left NGA in April, so that's my information cutoff date. But I personally review both what we call overhead collection and from other strategic and tactical platforms that were, I cannot even explain prosaically. I have a degree in physics, by the way, as well. And I am aware that you guys have not seen these reports, unfortunately. And I don't know why.
Do you have direct knowledge, you've spoken to people with direct knowledge that this imagery applies to crash sites, crash imagery?
I can't discuss that in an open session.
Okay. Do you have any information that the U.S. government is involved in a disinformation campaign to deny the existence of certain UAPs?
I can't go beyond what I've already stated publicly in my News Nation interview, so it touches other sensitive.
Okay. I'll yield the balance of my time. Back. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Fox?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I thank our witnesses for being here today. Mr. Grush, in your sworn testimony, you state that the United States government has retrieved supposedly extraterrestrial spacecraft and other UAP-related artifacts. You go so far as to state that the U.S. is in possession of, quote, non-human spacecraft, end quote, and that some of these artifacts have circulated with defense contractors. Several other former military and intelligence officials have come forward with similar allegations, albeit in non-public settings. However, Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick, the director of AARO, previously testified before Congress that there has been, and I quote, no credible evidence thus far of extraterrestrial activity or of, quote, off-world technology brought to the attention of the office. To your knowledge, is that statement correct?
It's not accurate. I believe Dr. Patrick mentioned about 30 individuals that have come to Arrow thus far. A few of those individuals have also come to Arrow that I also interviewed, and I know what they provided Dr. Patrick and their team.
Okay.
I was able to evaluate.
Okay, I need to go on.
Sure.
But my understanding that his statement is accurate, came from a direct quote. And this contradiction is a perfect example of why we need to inject transparency into our government. And for another example, look no further than the pitiful response to the Chinese spy balloon debacle earlier this year. You may remember the mass confusion that ensued when the balloon was first spotted over Montana, 4 days after it first entered U.S. airspace over Alaska. The Biden administration's initial inability to address the object grew into a continuous series of embarrassments. After news of the balloon reached the mainstream media, we were assured that the balloon posed no threat to our security. However, after the balloon was allowed to transit the entire continental United States, fighter jets were scrambled off the coast of South Carolina to shoot it down. This flip-flopping and obfuscation caused needless confusion, fear, and panic across the country. It's my hope, Mr. Chairman, that this sort of confusion will not be repeated. We should investigate the extent to which elements of our government possess or do not possess information that is of critical value to the American people. We owe it to the citizens of this nation to make sure that our government is transparent and accountable. We must make sure that our government provides answers, and Congress must do its duty to solicit those answers. With that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Yeah, Mr. Frost.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In 2022, NASA announced that it was commissioning an independent study team to examine UAPs. The NASA team is comprised of scientists across different fields, as well as former astronauts and pilots. In May, the independent study team held its first public meeting, which included the perspectives from NASA senior leaders, as well as perspectives from the Department of Defense and intelligence agencies. The NASA study team is also expected to release its first report pretty soon, and I think it's safe to say that we all eagerly await its results. Mr. Graves, how might NASA's research influence the commercial industry regarding safety in UAP?
I think NASA has a big role to play as far as commercial aviation safety, and it's one of their original charges as an organization. One of the recommendations that have been put forward is to utilize their existing aviation safety reporting system to serve as a short-term field and trusted platforms for pilots that want to report on UAP. It also has built-in analytics capability and employment technology.
Gotcha. And also, Mr. Graves, are there any other industries that may be influenced by NASA research on UAPs? And if so, how so?
Well, I think there is a large swath of commercial capabilities that can be brought to bear on this topic, from space-based or ground-based sensor systems that are available or can through commercial marketplaces. And I think NASA's work, as they work to identify and highlight specific parameters that can be found, we can take that information and promulgate this to the public sector so that we can have a more open conversation about what we're seeing.
In 2020, the Department of Defense released several videos of UAPs, including Mr. Fravor's experience, U.S. Navy pilots that recorded footage. In 2021, the Office of the Director of National Intelligence released a preliminary report on UAP events. NASA Administrator Bill Nelson stated that NASA would begin to investigate these events. In fact, I sit on the Science, Space, and Technology Committee, and when we were doing a hearing with the NASA Administrator Bill Nelson, I asked, why NASA needed to be fully funded, and there were many great reasons, but one of them was actually had to do with UAPs. They actually mentioned, is there life out there? I don't know. And so either way, these actions ultimately led NASA to assemble the independent study team that I mentioned earlier. Also in 2021, Harvard University stood up the Galileo Project to research and examine the origins of UAP. So it seems like both, from NASA and in the higher education community, because of the work that y'all have done and people standing up, I think we're seeing some of that stigma slowly going away. Mr. Fravor, do you believe that military pilots feeling empowered to share their UAP experiences has directly impacted the scientific community's research goals on this topic?
I would say yes. I would say that starting in 2017, when it actually came out, it took that stigma away. And I talked to multiple senators who said prior to that, if you mentioned UAP, they even laughed off the hill. And now we're sitting here today for public testimony on what's actually going on. I'm hoping that this curve will be more of an exponential and we'll get more and more transparent to the level that we can.
And it's important. I couldn't imagine, I'm not a pilot, but I used to fly gliders, so whatever. I got pilot, and so either way, I couldn't imagine, being in the glider and seeing something, and then not feeling like I had the agency to talk about it. Mr. Graves, can you discuss the importance of seeking scientists to sit on your advisory board?
Absolutely. I think ultimately this is going to be a scientific problem. And not only that, it's also an engineering problem. I've been working with the American Institute of Aeronautics and Astronautics, helping them stand up a UAP integration committee to help integrate their engineering prowess into this problem. And so, yes, very much, I think this is an engineering and scientific problem as much as a national security problem.
And how might Congress help to facilitate partnerships between the scientific community and the UAP focus groups within government?
Well, I think one of the things they can do is to have these types of hearings to communicate to the public that this is a topic of interest. I think that there is a pseudo-market, if you will, of interested capabilities and talent that want to approach this topic. And we're seeing that start to grow now. So I think continued conversation, reduction of stigma is going to allow that to flourish and allow answers to help generate themselves.
100%. Well, thank you all for being here and thank you for your work. I think it's important that we keep our top scientific minds focused on this issue and look for ways to increase collaboration. Thank you so much.
Mr. Coleman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me say over thank you for having this hearing. I will thank Mr. Burchett and Ms. Luna for leading this hearing, and with that, I yield my 5 minutes to Mr. Burchett.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to direct this, I believe, to Mr. Rush, but if any of you all feel like you need to jump in, just jump right in. We're good. Has the U.S. government become aware of actual evidence of extraterrestrial or otherwise unexplained forms of intelligence? And if so, when do you think this first occurred?
I like to use the term non-human. I like to denote origin, keeps the aperture open both scientifically. Certainly, like I've discussed publicly previously, 1930s.
Can you give me the names and titles of people with direct first-hand knowledge and access to some of this crash retrieval, some of these crash retrieval programs, maybe which facilities, military bases that the recovered material would be in? And I know a lot of Congress is talking about we're going to go to Area 51, there's nothing there anymore anyway. It's just, and we move like a glacier. As soon as we announce it, I'm sure the moving vans can pull up, but please.
I can't discuss that publicly, but I did provide that information both to the Intel committees and the Inspector General.
And we could get that in a skiff if we were allowed to get in a skiff with you. Would that be probably what you would think?
Sure, if they have the appropriate accesses, yeah.
What special access programs cover this information, and how is it possible that they have evaded oversight for so long?
I do know the names. Once again, I can't discuss that publicly and how they've evaded oversight. In a closed setting, I can tell you the specific trade practices.
When do you think those programs began? And do authorize it.
I do know a lot of that information, but that's something I can't discuss publicly.
All right. Maybe y'all want to jump in on that issue. What level of security clearance is required to fully access these programs?
Well, anybody who has
And I say that because myself, Representative Gates and Representative Luna were basically turned away at one point at Eglin, so please go right ahead.
certainly a difference between member access and say somebody like me, but anybody who has a TSSCI clearance and meets the eligibility criteria, the access to communicate authority should be able to grant you access.
Mr. Richard, if you'll yield, so just to put a fine point on that, there's nothing that you're aware of that's above special access program classification.
It's a misnomer that there's anything actually above top secret. Executive Order 13526 delineates the classification levels.
Right, but I draw upon of that because we can have access to those programs. And so the notion that we're not being given that access sort of defies our typical muscle memory here. Trying to send this first right back.
Thank you, Mr. Davis. Along those lines, Title 10, you may not know this now, but Title 10 and Title 50 authorization, they seem to say they're inefficient. So who gets to decide this, in your opinion, in the past?
A group of career senior executive officials.
Okay, government officials?
Both in and out.
Do what?
Both in and out of government, and that's about as far
I
as
got you. All right, well, that leads to my next question. Which private corporations are directly involved in this program? How much taxpayer money has been invested in these programs? Your knowledge. We know we audit the Pentagon every year. I've been here 5 years and they fail the damn thing every year. They lose over $1 billion a year, we think. And that's told part of the defense, maybe 60% of their assets are unaccounted for, whatever the heck that means in the public. Second, you go to jail for that kind of crap. So, Joe.
Yeah, I know when I'm $1 off of my DTS travel voucher, I get hammered, but it seems like it doesn't work.
If you sell over $600 worth of stuff on eBay now, you get a call from the IRS. So please, what corporation?
Yeah, I don't know these specific metrics towards the end of your question. The specific corporations I did provide to the committees in specific divisions, and I spent 11 and a half hours with both the committees.
Okay, has there been an active U.S. government disinformation campaign that denied the existence of unidentified aerial phenomena, and if so, why?
I can't go beyond what I've already espoused probably about that.
Okay, I've been told to ask you what that is and how to get it in the record.
Which,
What have you stated publicly in your interviews for the congressional record?
if you reference my News Nation interview, and I talk about a multi-decade campaign to disenfranchise public interest, basically.
I apologize, Mr. Chairman, I yield back negative 21 seconds.
Thank you. Mrs. Ocasio-Cortez.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to our witnesses for coming here today. And I do concur with the ranking members and with several other members here on this committee that this is a committee for whistleblowers and for the protection of whistleblowers as well. So we understand what you're putting on the table here. And thank you for that. Mr. Crush, you sat on the Unidentified Anomalous Phenomenon Task Force created in the 2020 NDAA, correct?
Yes.
There have been some things that have been mentioned here during this hearing that I wanted to pick up on. Mr. Graves, you mentioned specifically during the answers to one of your questions, you named Boeing contractors being engaged in an incident regarding this red cube about a football field wire. I was wondering if you could speak a little bit about the interaction, or Mr. Thrash, either of you, the interactions between defense contractor companies and any UAP-related programs or activities.
So I'll just say that the information about the contractor himself was provided by the witness, and I have no particular detail in that relationship.
Mr. Gross?
Kind of general response to what talks. Certainly the contractors, are the metal vendors, so to speak, the ones actually doing specific performance under the contract. UFOs.
Are they required to issue any disclosure regarding UAP sightings, or do they engage in any reporting around this?
In terms of the contractors,
Yeah.
not that I'm aware of.
They do not. Okay. Now, when it comes to notification that you had mentioned about IRAP programs, we have seen defense contractors abuse their contract before through this committee. I have seen it personally, and I have also seen the notification requirements for Congress abused. I am wondering, one of the loopholes that we see in the law is that there is, at least from my vantage point, is that depending on what we're seeing, is that there are no actual definitions or requirements for notification. What methods of notification did you observe? Like when they say they notified Congress, how did they do that? Do you have insight into that?
For certain IRAD activities, I can only think of ones conventional in nature. Sometimes they flow through certain, I would say, SAP programs that have Congress authority over the Air Force or something. Those are congressionally reported compartments, but IRAD's literally internal to the contractors, so as long as it's money, the profits, private investment, etc.
And
they put it
to put a finer point on it, when there's a requirement for any agency or company to notify, or any agency to notify Congress, do they contact the chairman of the committee? Do they get them on the phone specifically? Is this through an email to hypothetically a dead email box?
A lot of it comes from what they call the PPR, periodic program review process. If it's a SAP or controlled access program equity, and then those go to the specific committees, whether it be the SAS pass.
Thank you. I apologize. My time is limited. Mr. Graves, one of your main concerns is that the FAA currently does not have an official process to receive reports of UAP from pilots or others, correct?
Correct.
And in your experience, what data should the Aero program prioritize for potential collection? We have, location, date, time, but are there other specific characteristics that should be included in these reports?
Certainly. I think that there's two categories that would be important. One would be kinematics and understanding the specifics of how the vehicle or objects are moving. And the second would be a more zoomed-out approach of being able to look at origin and destination after, before the incident, as well as getting better contextual understanding how these objects are interacting with each other.
Thank you. Now, because I only have a minute left, I apologize we only have 5 minutes today, but for the record, if you were me, where would you look? Titles, programs, departments, regions, if you could just name anything. And I put that as an open question to the three of you.
I'd be happy to give you that in a closed environment. I can tell you specifically.
Thank you. Commander Fravor.
I would say, I told people, you have to know where to look, they're not going to divulge it to you because of classification rules. But if you know where to look and who to talk to, which is kind of an introduction point here, then you have it.
Okay.
I was an operator, so I was depending on close that Mr. Rush to do that more.
Okay. Thank you very much. I get back to the show.
Mr. Bay?
Thanks, and so I'm going to get to that in a second, but last week White House NSC spokesman John Curry stated that UAPs are having an impact on our training ranges and need to be treated as a legitimate issue. Do you concur with the statements? That's great, you do.
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Now, having said that, I'm going to take you to specific instances around the Phoenix Valley, because that's where I live. In '97, we had the famous Phoenix Light case. I don't know if any of you are familiar with that. There were two things that went along with that, and the explanation was military training range off Luke and the Very Goldwater range. Do you know anything different other than the official explanation of those lights?
Only what's in the public vernacular about it. That was outside the scope of my duties.
And if we wanted to, just my question along with my colleague from Ms. Ocasio-Cortez, if we wanted to find out more about that, where would we go to find the files and who would we address? And are you telling me to go to a SCIF so you can tell us in a SCIF?
I could potentially give you a vector on that. that specific case, I'm not, familiar with it in terms of public, but I give you a better closing remark.
That would be good, thank you. So if it's true that UAPs are having an impact on training ranges, and this administration considers it to be a legitimate issue, what steps can Congress take to address training range impacts? And I say that having two very large training ranges in my state, and so we'll start with Mr. Graves and go down.
Some of the initial procedures have been implemented, such as within the United States Navy, that have a range travel report that gathers information from pilots. I understand that a service-wide reporting mechanism is still pending. However, that would be a great next step, not only for gathering information, but for showing the truth that is an acceptable topic and reducing the stigma.
Okay, please, I'll continue.
Yeah, as a recipient of a lot of those training range reports, sometimes we only get contextual kind of oral reporting. It'd be nice if they attach all sensor data and there's a system in place that can handle multiple classifications of data. And that's an issue with the F-35, right? That jet was never built to be an ISR platform, and it's pain in the, we'll say, butt to get that data off. So.
Great.
And I would agree with previous with being the user of those training ranges. The data has to be out there. You have to acknowledge it, you're seeing them, and then you have to collect the data. Right now, you get the report, someone says, I saw something, but no one's trying to radar data to back it up.
Okay. Do you believe that the 2019 classification guidelines for UAPs interferes with the federal government's ability to be transparent with the American people? And do you think we need to be more transparent with the American people? All of you, yeah.
I'll say yes to that.
Yeah, I'm familiar with the UAP Task Force 2019 Security Classification Guide. I think it's fair. I did actually help author that.
You got a bias.
Yeah, but I will say, I'll call it a lazy attitude about declassifying videos. I mean, I've seen some of the videos of the recent shoot down, and I saw no reason that couldn't have been released as long as they mask some data. The American people deserve to see that imagery in full motion video.
I would think, well, in my opinion, I would say things are overclassified. I know for a fact that the pictures that came out in the 2020 report that had stuff off the East Coast, they were taken with an iPhone off the East Coast. The buddy, one of the senior people there, he said they were originally classified TSSCI. My question then was, what's TSSCI about these? They're an iPhone, literally off the bay case. It's not TSSCI. So they're overclassified, and as soon as they do that, they go in the vault, and you all have to look for them.
Yeah, so with the overclassification, that may be one way, but there are other ways that DoD or intelligence agencies are keeping this information from the American people, or even from Congress.
I think part of that has been not encouraging reporting. If the problem is not something that can be measured, it's not something that can be fixed.
Very good. But I'm out of time, and I thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Matt.
First of all, without objection, Representative Nick Langworthy of New York is waiving down the subcommittee for purpose of questioning witnesses in today's subcommittee hearing. And then we go to Mr. Burleson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate you guys coming out today, testifying. Look, I've been here for 6 months, and I'm pretty skeptical. I don't trust anything in this town. And so I think that's because I'm from Missouri, you got to show me, right? With that being said, there's been a lot of things that have been said in the public, Mr. Brush, and so I want to get down, if we can, some specifics, right? So at one point you had said that there has been harmful activity or aggressive activity. Has any of the activity been aggressive, been hostile, in your reports?
I know of multiple colleagues of mine that have visited and the activity by UAPs or by people within the federal government, both. Okay, so there has been activity by alien or non-human technology and or beings that has caused harm to humans. I can't get into the specifics in an open environment, but we see activity that I personally witnessed, not to be very careful here, because I never really acknowledged trade project. So when I personally witnessed myself and my wife very disturbing.
Okay. One of my constituents actually sent this next question, and I figured I'd ask it since I had the same thought. You said that the U.S. has intact spacecraft. You said the government has alien bodies or alien species. Have you seen the spacecraft?
I have to be careful to describe what I've seen firsthand, not in this environment, but I can answer that question. I have those tools.
And have you seen any of the bodies?
That's something I'm not a witness myself.
Okay, and so with that being said, the other statement that has been made that was intriguing to me and it's intriguing because my view has been that we are billions of light years away from any other system. And the concept that an alien species that's technologically advanced enough to travel billions of light years gets here and somehow is incompetent enough to not survive Earth or crashes is something that I find a little bit far-fetched. And with that being said, you had mentioned that there's interdimensional potential. Could you expound on that?
I'm going to answer your first question, and here's the fact witness and expert, but I will give you a theoretical framework we used to work off to kind of espouse crashes, regardless of your level of sentience, right? Planes crash, cars crash, and number of sorties, however high, a small percentage are going to end in mission failure, if you will, to say, in the Air Force. And then in terms of multi-dimensionality, that kind of thing, the framework that I'm familiar with, for example, is something called the holographic principle. It derives itself from general relativity and quantum mechanics, and that is, if you want to imagine 3D objects such as yourself casting a shadow onto a 2D surface, that's the holographic principle. So you can be projected, quasi-projected from higher dimensional space to lower dimensional. It's a scientific trope that you can actually cross. Literally, as far as I understand, there's probably guys at PhDs that we could probably learn about.
But you have not seen any documentation that that's what's occurred?
Only a theoretical framework discussion. Yes.
Okay. Okay. Occam's razor is that these aircraft, have they been identified that they are produced by domestic military contractors? That's what's being recovered?
Not to my knowledge, plus the recoveries predate a lot of our advanced programs that I've previously completed.
Would it be safe to say that there could be a scenario today where you have an aircraft that crashes because it's been involved in one program from one federal agency, but the agency that retrieves it is not aware of that program, and to then it appears alien in origin?
I mean, that's a hypothetical situation. I'm not aware of any historical situation that would match that you described.
You're not aware, it has not happened that you're aware of?
That I'm aware of.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, I go back.
Several months ago, my office received a protective disclosure from Eglin Air Force Base indicating that there was a UAP incident that required my attention. I saw a briefing regarding that episode and brought with me Congressman Burchett and Congressman Luna. We asked to see any of the evidence that had been taken by flight crew in this endeavor and to observe any radar signature as well as to meet with the flight crew. We were not afforded access to all the flight crew. And initially, we were not afforded access to images and to radar. Thereafter, we had a bit of a discussion about how authorities flow in the United States of America, and we did see the image. And we did meet with one member of the flight crew who took the image. The image was of something that I am not able to attach to any human capability, either from the United States or from any of our adversaries. And I'm somewhat informed on the matter, having served on the Armed Services Committee for 7 years, having served on a committee that oversees DARPA and advanced technologies for several years. When we spoke with the flight crew, And when he showed us the photo he'd taken, I asked why video wasn't engaged, why we didn't have a FLIR system that worked. Here's what he said. They were out on a test mission that day over the Gulf of Mexico. And when you're on a test mission, you're supposed to have clear airspace. Not supposed to be anything that shows up. And they saw a sequence of 4 craft in a clear diamond formation for which there is a radar sequence that I alone have observed in the United States Congress. One of the pilots goes to check out that diamond formation and sees a large floating, what I can only describe as an orb. Again, like I said, not of any human capability that I'm aware of. And when he approached, he said that his radar went down, he said that his FLIR system malfunctioned, and then he had to manually take this image from one of the lenses, and it was not automated in collection, as you would typically see in a test mission. So I guess I'll start with Commander Fravor. How should we think about the fact that this craft that was approached by our pilot had the capability of disarming a number of the sensor and collection systems on that craft?
Well, I think this goes to that national security side, and go back to the history of things showing up in certain areas and disabling our capabilities, which is disheartening. And for us, I mean, like I said, it completely disabled the radar on the aircraft. When I tried to do it, the only one we could see is passively, which is how we got that image. So I think that's a concern on what he's doing, not only how they operate, but their capabilities inside to do things like this.
And how should we think about 4 craft moving in a very clear formation, distant from one another, in a diamond? In all of the phenomena, perhaps, Mr. Gray, that you've analyzed, have we ever seen multiple craft in a single formation?
I have one particular case, and that was during the Eagle incident. The recording on the AT FLIR system shows a single object that rotates. You hear the pilots refer to a fleet of objects that is not visible on the FLIR system. And that was something that I witnessed during the debrief as part of the radar data on the situational awareness page. I would like to add, whoever commented, just small bit of anger. I would feel that those pilots are still facing that difficulty in reporting this topic, and they don't have the tools to be able to mitigate this issue. It just goes to show how serious this is and why this is such an important issue for our pilots and for our nation.
It was stated explicitly to me by these test pilots that if you have a UAP experience, the best thing you can do for your career is forget it and not tell anyone. Because any type of reporting, either above the surface or below the surface, does have a perceived consequence to these people, and that is a culture we must change if we want to get to the truth. Mr. Chairman, I would observe that perhaps as we move forward from this hearing, there are some obvious next steps. Every person watching this knows that we need to meet with Mr. Brush in a secure, compartmentalized facility so that we can get fulsome answers that do not put him in jeopardy and that give us the information we need. Second, I would suggest that the radar images that were collected of this formation of craft out of Eglin Air Force Base, and specifically the actual image taken by the actual flight crew that we can actually validate, be provided to the committee, subpoenaed if necessary, so that we're able to track how to get this type of reporting and analysis done in a more wholesome way. That would be my recommendation, humbly, as a guest here at the final oversight committee.
Ms. Mays?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning to our witnesses who are testifying today. I want to thank each of you for being here to discuss a topic of great importance to our national security. Earlier this year, a Chinese spy balloon was shot down off the coast of my home state of South Carolina. Since the Roswell incident in 1947, many Americans have wondered about the dangers of unknown objects crisscrossing our skies. Whether these are UAPs or weather phenomena, advanced technology from American allied or enemy forces, or something more out of this world. So my first question, I have several questions, and if we could just be quick on this first two, I'll ask each of you the same question, and then I'll get to each of you individually. The first one, when you reported your experiences with the UAP, did you face any repercussions with your superiors, yes or no?
No.
actually never seen anything personal, believe it or not.
All right. And then do you believe there's an active disinformation campaign within our government to deny existence of UAPs? Yes or no?
I don't have an answer to that.
As previously stated, all of it
And previously, when Project UFO, yes, but currently I was with the United States government.
Thank you. I have a few questions for Mr. Graves. What percentage of UAP sightings yearly go unreported by our pilots?
This is an approximation based off of my personal experience speaking with non-real pilots, but I would estimate we're somewhere near 5% reporting perhaps.
So like 95% basically don't report seeing UAPs.
This is my personal estimate.
In the incident off Virginia Beach, do you believe the Navy took the danger to your aircraft seriously after it was reported?
Absolutely.
A few questions for Mr. Fravor. As an expert naval aviator, have you ever seen an object that looked and moved like the Tic Tac UAP?
No.
Did the Tic Tac UAP move in such a way that defied the laws of physics?
The way we understand it, yes.
Many dismiss UAP reports as classified weapons testing by our own government, but in your experience as a pilot, does our government typically test advanced weapon systems right next to multi-million-dollar jets without informing our pilots?
No, we have test rooms for that.
It took over 15 years for your encounter with the Tic Tac to be classified. Do you feel there was a good reason to prevent lawmakers from having access to this footage?
No, I just think it was ignored when it happened. It just sat somewhere in a file. Never important.
It happens a lot here. Shocker. Mr. Brush, a couple of questions for you too, sir, this morning. What percentage of UAPs do you feel are adequately investigated by the U.S. government? Of the 5% that are reported.
I can only speak for my personal leadership within GA. I tried to look at every report that came through that I could triage. So.
Do you believe that officials at the highest levels of our national security apparatus have unlawfully withheld information from Congress and subverted our oversight authority?
There are certain elected leaders that have more information. I'm not sure what they share with certain gang members, etc., but certainly I would not be surprised.
Okay. You say that the government is in possession of potentially non-human spacecraft. Based on your experience and extensive conversations with experts, do you believe our government has made contact with intelligent extraterrestrials?
Something I can't discuss in public setting.
Okay, I can ask when you think this occurred. If you believe we have crashed craft, I was saying it earlier, do we have the bodies of the pilots who piloted this craft?
As I've stated publicly already on News Nation interview, biologics came to some of these recoveries. Yeah.
Were they, I guess, human or non-human biologics?
Non-human, and that was the assessment of people with direct knowledge on the program I talked to that are currently still in the program.
And was this documentary, this video, photos, eyewitness? Like, how would that be determined?
The specific documentation I would have to talk to you and speak about.
Okay, so you may or may not be able to answer my last question, and maybe we get into a skip at the next hearing that we have, but who in the government, either what agency, sub-agency, what contractors, who should be called into the next hearing about UAPs, either in a public setting or even in a private setting? And you probably can't name names, but what agencies or organizations, contractors, et cetera, do we need to call in to get these questions answered, whether it's about funding, what programs are happening, and what's out there?
I can give you a specific cooperative and hostile witness list of specific individuals that were in those.
And how soon can you get that list?
Happy to provide it to you after the hearing.
Super, thank you.
She's good.
Yeah, Mr.
Thank you very much. I'd like to thank all of the witnesses for being here today to discuss this very unique topic. I'd like to jump right into my question, if you don't mind. Commander Fravor, can you briefly describe your background?
Yeah, I was a enlisted Marine, Naval Academy graduate, Navy, flew for 18 years, got a master's from the University of Houston, and I've worked in the private sector for the last 16, 17 see a lot of difference.
It was really gold-plated credentials. Commander Fravor, we've all seen the floating Tic Tac video that you engaged with on November 14th, 2004. Can you briefly talk about why you were off the coast of San Diego that day?
Yeah, we were in a workup called Babber, so we integrate the ships with the carrier, the airway with the carrier, and start kind of surveying that area defense to not only our skills, but those of the U.S. Princeton, when they had been tracking for 2 weeks. The problem was that there was never manned aircraft airborne when they were tracking. And this was the first day, and unfortunately, we were the ones airborne that went inside.
Do you remember the weather that day? Or was it cloudy or windy or anything out of the ordinary on the Pacific Coast?
It was actually, if you're familiar with San Diego, it was a perfect day, light winds, no white caps, clear skies, not a cloud. It was, for flying, it was the best.
Now, is it true that you saw, in your words, a 40-foot flying Tic-Tac shaped object?
That's correct. Or for some people that can't know what Tic Tac is, it's a giant flying propane tank.
Did this object come up on radar or interfere with your radar or the USS Princeton?
The Princeton tracked it, the Nimitz tracked it, the E2 tracked it. We never saw it on our radars. Our fire control radars never picked it up. The other airplane that took the video did get it on our radar. As soon as it tried to lock it, jammed the radar, spit the lock, he rapidly switched over to the target pod, which you can do with that.
From what you saw that day and what you've seen on video, did you see any source of propulsion from the flying object, including on any potential thermal scans from your aircraft?
No, there's no IR plume coming out, and Chad, who took the video, went through all the EO, which is black and white TV, and the IR modes, and there's no visual signs of propulsion. It's just sitting in space at 20,000 feet.
In your career, have you ever seen a propulsion system that creates no thermal exhaust?
No.
Can you describe how the aircraft maneuvered?
Abruptly, very determined. It knew exactly what it was doing. It was aware of our presence, and it had acceleration rates. I mean, it went from 0 to matching our speed in no time.
Now, if the fastest plane on Earth was trying to do these maneuvers that you saw, would it be capable of doing it?
No, not even close.
And just to confirm, this object had no wings, correct?
No wings.
Now, was the aircraft that you were flying, was it armed?
No, it never felt threatened at all.
If the aircraft was armed, you believe that your aircraft or any aircraft in possession of the United States could have shot the Tic Tac down?
I'd say no, just on the performance it would just left in a split second.
It looks like we have a problem here that needs further investigation. In your belief, is this flying Tic Tac, I mean, is it capable of being the product of any other nation on the Earth?
No, like I said earlier, I think it defies current material science and the ability to develop that much propulsion. And I know there's no statistics and calculations, which is beyond anything we have.
Well, either the United States has an adversary here in this world that we don't know, or we really have some serious investigations to do. I really appreciate you being here. Is there anything else about the November 14th, 2004 incident that you think is important for this committee to know that you haven't been asked here today?
No, it's been said it's probably the most credible UFO sighting in history based on all the sensors that we're tracking it, and then for us to get visual and to go against the naysayers that it's something on the screen or whatever. I mean, there's 4 sets of human eyeballs. We're all very credible. Of the 6 of us that were involved in the thing, including the video, every one of us is going to be 20 plus years in the military in very responsible positions. So I would say the world needs to know that. It's not a joke.
Thank you very much for your testimony here today for all of you, and I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Owens. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you all for being here and the courage it took to come forward and the sacrifice that you should have made. I serve on the National Security Subcommittee for the Financial Services Committee, so I really want to stay in the national security line, if I may. So when we think about traditional adversaries and both us towards them and them towards us, we probe their capabilities, we look for weaknesses, and we collect that data, that reconnaissance for in the event we need it in the future. For each each of you, yes or no question, based off your own experience or the data that you've been privy to, is there any indication that these UAPs could be essentially collecting reconnaissance information? Mr. Gray?
Yes.
Mr. Brush?
Very sensitive.
Mr. Fravor?
Very possible.
Again, in the national security vein, is it possible that these UAPs would be probing our capabilities? Yes or no, Mr. Graves?
Yes.
Brush? Yes. Fravor?
Yes.
Is it possible that these UAPs are testing for vulnerabilities in our current systems?
Yes.
Yes. Possible.
Do you feel, based off of your experience and information that you've been privy to, that these UAPs provide an existential threat to the national security of the United States? Mr. Graves? Yes, sir. Potentially.
Same answer, actually.
Mr. Graves and Fravor, in the event that your encounters have become hostile, would you have had the capability to defend yourself, your crew, your aircraft? Is, based off of the information that you've been privy to, is there any indication that these UAPs are interested in our nuclear technology and capabilities?
Yes.
By external observation, sure, that could be a fair assessment. Yes.
Is there any indication the Department of Energy is involved in UAP data collection and housing?
I don't know.
I can't confirm it on that public setting.
Would you do it in a secure setting?
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, I think I'm the last member to go, but there clearly is a threat to the national security of the United States of America. As members of Congress, we have a responsibility to maintain oversight and be aware of these activities so that, if appropriate, we take action. I would encourage the chairman to demand that we have any and all, but in particular Mr. Brush, talk to us in a skiff. And if that access is denied, I will personally volunteer to initiate a Holman rule against any personnel or any program or any agency that denies access to Congress. Mr. Chairman, with that, I will give the remainder of my time to my fellow colleague from Tennessee, Mr. Burchett.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Otis, for great questions, brother. Mr. Grush, I might have asked this before, but I want to make sure. Do you have any personal knowledge of someone who's possibly been injured working on the legacy UAP reverse engineering?
Yes.
Okay. How were they injured? Was it something like a radioactive type situation or something we didn't understand? I've heard people talk about Havana syndrome, hypertension incidences. What was your recollection of that?
I can't get into specifics, but you can imagine assessing an unknown. There's a lot of potentialities you can't fully prepare for.
How do you think we ought to handle UAP whistleblower complaints like yours in the future?
Yeah, there was some issue with mine, so the PPD-19 process, it goes to the Intel committees, for PPD-19 or ICD-120. There's not a good way for the Intelligence Community Inspector General to provide that to other committees. And I asked my information to be sent to the House and Senate Armed Services Committee because there are Title 10 equities at play, but there was no smooth process to do so. Yeah.
It's a trash can. Are you aware of any individuals who participate in reverse engineering programs for non-terrestrial craft?
Personally, yes.
You know anyone that would be willing to testify if there were protections for them?
Certainly closed door, and assurances, breaking your NDA, you're not going to get administratively punished. Yeah.
And you'll.
Thank you. I'm going to do something a little bit out of the ordinary here. We're going to give 3 people a chance in an additional 3 minutes. So, Mr. Burchett, do you want to keep on?
Why don't you come back to me, Mr. Chairman? Ms. Linda, is she on that list?
Chairman, I'd like to submit for the record an article by News Nation, and it follows Mr. Brush's full interview for the record?
Without objection.
Thank you. Mr. Brush, why is it that you refer to the phenomenon as non-human intelligence? Why do you use the basis of extraterrestrial life?
I think the phenomenon is very complex, and I believe an open mind analytically to specific origin.
When you say specific origin, are you referring, can you elaborate on that for those that are-
If it's a traditional extraterrestrial origin or something else that we don't quite understand from your biological or astrophysics perspective, just like keep an open mind on what it could be.
Okay, and referring to your News Nation interview, you had referenced specific treaties between governments. Article 3 of the Nuclear Arms Treaty with Russia identifies UAPs. It specifically mentions them. To your knowledge, are there safety measures in place with foreign governments or other superpowers to avoid an escalatory situation in the event that a UAP malevolent event occurs?
Yeah, you're referring to actual public treaty in the UN Register. Somebody mentioned that the agreement on measures to reduce the risk of outbreak of nuclear war signed in 1971, unclassified treaty publicly available. And if you cite the George Washington University National Security Archives, you will find declassified in 2013 specific provisions in the specific red line flash message traffic with specific codes pursuant to Article 3 and Article, also Situation 2, which is in the previously classified NSA archive. What I would recommend, and I tried to get access, but all the silence at the White House, was those specific incidents when those message traffic was used. I think some scholarship on that would open the door to further investigation using those publicly available information.
Thank you. And then my last question with 51 seconds remaining. You mentioned white-collar crimes potentially being taking place in regards to a cover. Can you elaborate?
I have concerns based on the interviews I conducted under my official duties of potential violations of the federal acquisition regulations, the FAR.
Thank you very much. And I yield the remainder of my time.
Okay, we'll go to Mr. Raskin for 3 minutes.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I thank the witnesses for their endurance and service today. Mr. Fravor, you described your episode in detail now, and you call it the most credible UFO sighting in history. I wonder, was this the first time that you encountered a UFO or a UAP in 2004?
Yes.
And what was your general attitude or perspective on the UFO discussion before then?
I never felt that we were alone with all the planets out there, but God was a UFO person. I wasn't watching History Channel.
And have you had experiences or encounters since that happened?
No.
And so, have you formed any general conclusions about what you think you experienced?
Yes, I think what we experienced was, like I said, well beyond the material science and capabilities we had at the time, that we have currently, or that we're going to have in the next 10 to 20 years.
Very good. Mr. Rush, you've been able to answer in great detail on certain questions, and then other things you say you're not able to respond to. Can you just explain where you're drawing the line? What's the basis for that?
Yeah, based on my job service security review and what they determined is unclassified.
I see. So you're answering any questions that just call upon your knowledge, not unclassified questions, but anything that relates to classified matters you're not commenting on in this context.
In an open session, but happy to participate in a closed session at the right level. Yeah.
Okay. And Mr. Graves, you said that there are dozens of fellow pilots, military pilots. Are there also commercial pilots who've encountered the same kind of sightings that you described before?
They are similar. Commercial pilots have less training, less sensors to be able to use out and look for objects over wide swaths of airspace. And so pilots are seen, commercial pilots are seen, and typically closer, and the range of what they're seeing is pretty large.
Well, what is the most vivid, concrete sighting with the naked eye of the objects that you described before, the cube-like objects?
Certainly, I think the most vivid sighting of that would have been near mid-area that we had at the entrance to our working area. One of these objects was completely stationary at the exact entrance to our working areas, not only geographically but also at altitude. So it was right where all the jets were going, essentially, on the seaboard. The two aircraft flew within about 50 feet of the object, and that was a very close visual sighting.
And you were in one of the aircraft?
I was not. I was there when the pilot landed. He canceled the mission after, and I was there. He was ready with all his gear on, with his mouth open. And I asked him what the problem was. He said it was him.
He said he was 50 feet away from it?
Yes, sir.
And his description of the object was consistent with the description you gave us before?
A dark gray or black cube inside of a clear sphere.
Inside of a clear sphere.
Yes.
And with no self-evident propulsion system.
No wings, no higher energy coming off the vehicle, nothing tethering it to the ground. And that was primarily what we were experiencing out there.
I'm over time. Thank you very much for your service, and we'll go back to Mr. Chairman.
Very good, Mr. Burchett.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is for all three of y'all. Chairman, Mr. Grace, why did you come forward on this issue?
I came forward because I felt that my colleagues did not have a way to mitigate the safety threat, and I wanted to help them. I was trained as an aviation safety officer by the Navy, and this seemed, it just felt right. I felt like I had to help folks that are still flying and dealing with this.
Mr. Rush.
Purely a sense of duty. I was sworn oath when I was a cadet 18 years ago, and I still uphold that even
Commander.
I was pestered by a friend, and I asked why, and he said, "You're the one person that they can't discredit, and they'll add credibility to the New York Times article." And after about 6 times, I said,
Yeah. This town isn't made, unfortunately, by people like y'all. We thank y'all. I do want to also thank the people in the audience and people that are watching this and people all over the world that kept this issue alive. And their criticism and derogatory remarks, and we're trying to get to the bottom of it. So God bless y'all. Thank y'all so much. We really appreciate you guys. Yeah. That's all we've learned. Y'all keep clapping as politicians just keep talking. Let me ask y'all, how can the public contribute to UAP reporting, and what avenues you think are available to the public to report these sightings?
Right now, I think there is a lot of public options for that every man to be able to report on this. I think even for professionals that have sensitive data, that are seeing these on a regular basis, they're still hesitant to come forward. And so for the general public, I think encouraging the conversations that we're having today, looking for technology solutions that can be distributed so that objective data can be gathered is the first place to go.
Mr. Rush?
I'll just touch on the whistleblower side of it. I do encourage current and former military, intelligence community, and industry contractors to come forward in a legal way, either through the IC review or whatever the cognizant IGs are, to be joining in this discussion.
Commander, I guess I should say this for the record. My daddy was United States Marine Corps First Marine Division, so yes, sir. He was old school. He was just a puller on the elbow. So thank you. Yes, sir. I'm not anything like my daddy. He was incredible. I'm very mediocre, so
For me, I was an accident investigator, so the biggest thing you learn, and I think witnesses need to do is, one, don't try and make the fish bigger than it was. Stick to the facts, write it down, and don't speculate what you think it is, because it's for your decision. Just write the facts down, and all the facts together, and we can start to investigate and get a real honest story instead of it was just.
Thank you all, and I want to thank everybody who made this stream today. Mr. Chairman, how you?
Thank you much, Mr. Garcia.
Okay, now we're going to be making some closing remarks, and so I just wanted to say a few things. First, to our witnesses, I want to thank all of you for being here with us today. I know that it takes a lot of courage, and you're telling really important information to this committee, and I just want to thank you also for all three of your service to our country. I also want to just note that today's hearing was both important but also serious. And I want to thank our subcommittee chairman, Mr. Brockman, for running a very fair and substantive hearing. I do want to thank the committee staff on both sides for the amount of work that took to get this hearing in place. And certainly to all the members that have been involved in this issue prior to the hearing. I also want to note for our witnesses and for the public that I'm a freshman member of Congress and I've only been here for 7 months, but this is by far the most bipartisan conversation and discussion that I've seen happen in the Congress. And I think that a topic of this significance as it relates to our national security, as it relates to information that we're trying to gather for the American public, does bring people together, and I think that's really great to see. I think it's also important to note for the public, today in our hearings, we have on our side also both our full ranking member, which is Mr. Raskin, and our vice ranking member, which is Ms. Ocasio-Cortez, both here at our hearing. I think it shows the importance and seriousness that our side of the aisle is taking to this important hearing, but also the broader issue as it relates to working with our Republican counterparts on this committee. I want to additionally add that I think, and I encourage, I think it's really important that we have and continue these discussions and these hearings. Clearly, there's a lot of information that we don't know, but it's also very clear that we have to continue our investigation and accountability on asking the right questions and ensuring that they're part of the public record. One thing that was important today is some folks might wonder, why are we asking questions that might already be out there or have been asked before? It's important that they're asked and put into the public record as it relates to this committee. And so I want to thank you for answering some questions multiple times, not just in maybe meetings you had with some members, but also here in the public. Let me also just add an additional note. It's important also that our friends in the media, those that are not just reporting on this hearing, but that have reported on this topic and that may in the future, the media has an important role in this process. And it's very important that the media engages, does independent investigation, and reports on not just what happened today, but what they see independently as what has happened around UAPs in the broader community. That is also an important public benefit that we have in trying to get the information and the facts as it relates to this. Let me also just say finally that as a teacher and an educator, a longtime teacher and researcher, that I also really believe in following facts, in doing your homework, and making sure that you follow science as we try to get the most information as possible. So I want to thank you all for agreeing to do that today. Transparency is a cornerstone of government. We live in a vast galaxy, a lot of unanswered questions, and thank you all for being here today. Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I'd like to one more time thank Mr. Virgin and Ms. Luna for bringing this to our attention. It's a topic that has interested me since I was in school. It was a very illuminating hearing. Obviously, I think several of us are going to look forward to getting some answers in a more confidential setting. I assume some legislation will come on this.
Sure. I apologize, Mr. Chairman. I need to compliment the folks in my office that did a lot of the work on this. Rachel and Noah sitting behind me here. They're very quiet and humble, but without them, this thing would not have come off like it did, so I apologize.
Thank you. I think we're going to want to look into what we can do to make more of this information public. I think there's certainly a time period after which it should always be made public, and people have been concerned about these issues, like I said, since I was in high school. But in any event, I'd like to thank everybody who was here, sitting through the entire hearing. Without objection, members will have 5 legislative days to submit materials and submit additional written questions for the witnesses, which will be forwarded to the witnesses for their response. If there's no further business without objection, the subcommittee stands adjourned.
Graves had a lot of detail. allowed to like? Okay, let's go. Hey, we're trying to head out.